Hey there, this is the first in a series of 3 videos about making maps with Tableau. This is for primarily for a class at University of Georgia called Community GIS. We're going to do some examples of mapping with some historical parcel data that students have been working within that class, but it's meant to also be a more general guide. We're working with Tableau Public, which is publicly available. It has some pretty noticeable limitations, but there's a lot you can still do with it. So when you've loaded Tableau Public and installed it on your local computer, you'll see that you'll get a lot of different options to connect to different data sources. And you can actually do multiple data sources at a time. You can link them based on some kind of join field. In this case, we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to load a spatial file. And Tableau works with lots of different spatial formats. Shapefiles, GeoJSON, and KML are the most common ones that I see here that I would use. It'll also do Esri Geo databases. It doesn't do GeoPackage, unfortunately, which is one of my favorites. But in this case, we have GeoJSON files. We should be good. So I'm just going to leave it as the default here. Here's a list of GeoJSON files, and I'm going to load parcel data. So if I click on Open here, you'll see what it'll say is here's your data set, right? And then it'll give you the attribute table. This is a vector data set, which is what Tableau can work with. And you can see there's a list of fields here that would be in there. And at the end, it's got a geometry column, which is where the spatial data sits. If I had another data source, like an Excel file that I wanted to join to these data, I could load this as well now by clicking on this Add button. And then it would automatically try to look for a join field and add it in so that it'd be accessible. But in this case, we're just going to stick with this. Now, the way that Tableau works is you create these different worksheets that are all individual graphics. And at the end, we'll walk through in the third video, you can add them into a dashboard together. So you add them modularly in. You build your individual graphics and then add them together into a single dashboard. So in this case, we'll go to worksheet 1. And this is our workspace. You'll see over here, there's a list of variables that are in the attribute table. We've got some qualitative variables that are listed as dimensions, and then measures, which are largely quantitative measures. In our case, we just want to use the geometry. We just want to map some stuff out. And so that's as simple as taking this and dragging it to this field. And then you'll see it'll automatically detect this as a map that we want to make. There's lots of different visualizations options over here. We'll go over a little bit later in a second video how to create some of those. In this case, it just gives a couple of map options. There's also a graduated symbol map that if we wanted to mess around with that we could. We're not going to do too much with that in this time, but we have our spatial data here. Now, once we have these data, we can go ahead and style them. So there's not a lot of options here. If you're used to using desktop GIS software, it's a little bit limited in terms of what you can do with these data, but you can do some things like choropleth mapping, right? So if I want to do that, I could pick one of these fields that I would want to use to be the basis of a map. So in this case, I'm going to use square footage. It's not a particularly helpful measure. We can see square footage of these parcels kind of in the way they're mapped out, but we're going to use this for the sake of argument. And so we want to map that out. What we would do is we'd grab this variable and we drag it over to the color field. And what that's going to say is choose the color based on this attribute. So when I drop it there, ooh, it didn't change. The reason for that is that you can see here this sum, it automatically tries to aggregate these together in some way. And so you have to actually change it and say, no, I want to look at the individual attributes for each parcel. And you do that by clicking on this drop-down menu here and clicking on dimension rather than sum. So if I click on dimension, now you can see the bigger parcels are a darker color. And actually when I mouse over, you see what the value is. This is 258,000, I believe it's square feet. Versus this little parcel here is only 8495 square feet in the way that it looks. There's one other kind of modification you can make to this map, that is you can add base maps. And we'll talk about that in the second video.